So I want to tell all of y'all about the horror books I read in October. Definitely wasn't my scariest year ever, but it was decent. Hi, hello, and welcome back to my channel. My name is Alex, and today is my October wrap-up. If you're new here, October is my all horror month, so I read all horror books in October. If you've been with my channel for a minute though, you know that I was like coming off a preemptive book slump, reading slump, when October came. So I was struggling to get into reading for October, even though October is like easily my favorite reading month of the year. And then if you watched last week's episode, The Maybes, I have just been struggling. My mental health has been struggling. I just got a lot of negative news, like back to back to back, and on their own each of them was not really that bad, but because it was all happening at once, it really felt monumental. Really just had to check out for a little bit, and I'm just going to try and take it easy for the rest of the year because I know myself and I know I can't push anymore. I have to be realistic. Yeah, enough of that, let's move on. And we're going to talk about the horror books that I read in October. The first book I read in October was Nothing But Blackened Teeth by Cassandra Khaw. Okay, so in the Maybe series for October, I talked about how this book was extremely short and how the description was also really short. Let me tell you, coming off of a reading slump in September and then reading this book was not the way to go. Despite how short this book was, I struggled through the whole thing. Every page felt like a struggle. And it was so short, and I was like, I can finish it, no problem. Day tops. Oh my god. I'm not joking when I tell you it took me like 3-4 days because I just could not care about this book. I could not get into it. So the premise of this book is a bunch of, I think it's like 5 friends decide to rent out this notoriously haunted mansion in Japan as kind of like a thrill seeker adventure for their wedding. Apparently there's like a bride that was left at the altar when they got married there, and she ended up dying, and then all the bodies of the young girls that have been sacrificed to her over the years are like stacked up in the walls. It sounds very promising. Then we get into the book, and first off, these 5 friends I would not call friends. Like, frenemies is more the vibe I was getting, and it was like, why are y'all even all together? Why are y'all even friends? And we never really got into anybody's backstory, like could not really figure out what the beef was with anybody. Like, it was mentioned here and there, but it was also superficial that I was like, I don't really understand why you guys are still pretending to be friends at y'all's grown-up age. There was just a lot of undercurrent that we never really got into, and I think that was because of the shortness of the book. But if you knew the book was going to be short, there are ways to concisely write short books in a way that feels very complete. This was not concise writing. I would definitely call this purple prose. There was a lot of things that were written about that I could not care about, and I didn't understand why we were spending so much time writing about things that made no impact on the story. There were a few moments in the book that were kind of like, ooh, a little jumpy and scary, but this writer particularly liked to use phonetic Japanese. I don't know that I'm explaining that correctly, but like how you would say a Japanese word is how they wrote it. So like when you would go to look up this word, you can't really look up words because it's the phonetic pronunciation of another language. Do you know what I mean? They would just drop these words in there with no context clues, and it was like the whole book was written in a way that wasn't easily consumable. It really tripped up the story because they're like, oh, this, and she'd be terrified. I'm like, what are we looking at? what are we talking about? I have no idea what's going on. And at some point in the book, I just stopped looking up stuff because I was like, this is really becoming annoying to me. Like, I can't even focus on the book because I can't put together this scene. I can't figure out what's happening. Lots of plot holes, no character arcs, not very much character development. I was really disappointed. I could really talk about this book forever, but I won't. There's plenty of reviews on Goodreads that felt very similar to how I'm feeling about it. If you want to dig into those, I do that. I dig into reviews, especially if I don't really like a book. Even me and my vivid imagination could not get on the same level as this writer. So I ended up giving it 3 stars, and I felt very mad that I wasted a lot of my time. I spent a lot of time trying to get into this book, trying to really like it, and coming off a reading slump and reading this book was not the way to go. But yeah, I guess there are a few people that actually really enjoyed this book, so as always, take my reviews as my reviews. They're gonna be very subjective, obviously. Let's move on. The next book I read in October was The Deep by Nick Cutter. Okay, I told you guys that I wanted to get into Nick Cutter because he's supposed to be a really good gore writer. This book was gross. Oh my gosh, the gore writing. Very good, okay? Very good gore writing. So the premise of this book, there is a pandemic happening in the world where people will get sick and forget things. And it seems like really small and innocent at the time, and until they forget how to like literally take care of themselves and their body forgets to breathe and things like that. Like, it's kind of wild, but a huge amount of the population is dies to this disease that they can't really figure out how it works or how to stop it or how to treat it. And so we're following this brother. Now I can't remember his name, I'm sorry, but he gets a phone call from the government that's like, hey, we need you to come ASAP to the middle of the ocean because your brother needs you. Your brother that you haven't heard from in like, I don't know, 20 years or something like that. And he's like, okay, yeah, like my life's in complete shambles, I guess I'll go. And they go, and he finds out that they've built this laboratory in the deepest part of the Marianas Trench, which is like 8 miles under the ocean. And they lost communications with this. And the last communication that came up was specifically requesting this guy to come down and help his brother. So y'all know about me in the deep ocean. It's not it for me. That shit's scary. So immediately there was like a little bit of a draw here to be scared because we're talking about going into the deepest part of the ocean. And then Nick Cutter. Like, I've been wanting to get into Nick Cutter, so it was like 2 things that were really gonna, you know, do it for me. And okay, this book really did deliver. Like, we're underwater. The vibe that Nick Cutter was able to get in this book was just really phenomenal. Like, you could feel the like claustrophobia and the anxiety of being that deep underwater, and like just the little things about being in that submerged laboratory were sending me. Like, I was freaking out the whole time, and then when stuff started happening, oh man, it's wild. This book is wild, okay, because I just couldn't really figure out what was going on, and that really helped me get through it because I wanted to find out what was going on. I did have some pace issues about halfway through the book. We really started going off on these tangents of other people's stories, and it really slowed it down for me, and I caught myself, you know, getting bored with the story a little bit. So yeah, there was a little bit of a pace issue and somewhere in the middle, and then by the time we got to the end of the book, I was like, let's finish this. Let's end it. We have to end it now. This is taking way too long. So I did have pace issues in the middle and at the end because I was just getting frustrated. Like, I wanted to know the answers. I wanted to know what was going on. And the end of the book really just, he got me. Like, it ended up being so much bigger than I ever could imagined it. Like, it blew my brain. I didn't know what I was expecting, but then when he like did the big reveal, I was like, well, okay. Shocking. It was shocking to me that he laid so much foundational work for it to end so big. Like, by the time we got to the end of the book, I understood why he spent so much time doing what he did, but there would have been a better way to do it, I think. Just cutting a few things here and there would have really shortened up the book and livened up the pace. If you cannot handle gore writing, if you cannot handle animal gore writing, do not read this book. When I tell you I went through every emotion reading this book, I was sobbing by the end of this book. Sobbing. There's a lot. There's a lot happening in this book. The depth in this book was phenomenal. I ended up giving it 4 stars just because I had pacing issues and things like that. But otherwise, this book blew me away. It really did. Like, I will definitely be adding Nick Cutter to the regular horror lineup from now on. The next book that I read in October was The Family Plot by Cherie Priest. I gave this book 4 stars, but I struggled giving it the 4 stars. But I was like, you know, 3 stars for me means I didn't like it. And anything below 3 stars means I absolutely hated it. So I couldn't give it 3 stars because I didn't hate it, but 4 stars to me just seemed like too much because I didn't love it. Like, when I gave it 4 stars, like, I gave the Nick Cutter book 4 stars, and it was not on par with the Nick Cutter book at all. So it was like, I felt completely conflicted giving it this 4-star rating. Let's just say that. The premise of the book: Dahlia, Doll, I think is what they call her mostly in the book. Her father owns a repo business, and they basically gut old houses and like resell pieces of it. So basically he's been in the red for like ever, and this old woman is like, hey, I have this really big property that I want to get rid of. They're going to tear down the house, and you can have anything in the house, in the garage, in the carriage house. It's really old, it's historical, blah, blah, blah. She shows him some pictures. He's like ecstatic about this house. And she's willing to like give it to him for a pretty reasonable price, even though him paying this reasonable price is like, if this doesn't work out, we're done. So there's a lot of pressure to get this job done and get it done as cheaply as possible because basically they're financially struggling. So he tells his daughter, look, we're in the red. If we don't close this deal out, if we don't get a good haul from this, we're done. So she goes in with all this pressure, takes 3 guys with her. 2 of them are her part of her family. And she just has this thing about old houses. She loves old houses. Okay? Immediately when they get there, the vibes are off. Like, you can tell there's like some haunted business going on. But she's just like so cavalier about it. She's like, oh, it's fine. All old houses are haunted. So it's like, okay, let's just move on then. The pace for this book did not work for me, because about the first 3/4 of the book, we're just talking about things that they found in the house or in the garage or in the carriage house or in the barn that they're going to sell. If you like listening to people talk about antiques or furniture, this book is probably going to be for you. I did not find any of that interesting. I was here for the ghost story, which took a very long time to set up. Eventually, the ghost story does get set up. The haunted house does get set up. By the time we get all of the good action of the ghost story, of the haunted mansion, it had been too many pages for me to be completely invested in the story. Cherie Priest did do a good job writing the horror bits of it. When we got down to the final, like, reveal, the big moments, they were written really well. I was really impressed. But all the time leading up to those moments, I did not enjoy. I had a really hard time connecting with any of the characters. Could not even tell you what any of the characters look like, because I don't even think she took time to tell us that. Could tell you what the house looks like. and all the stuff that they pulled out and how much they think it's going to cost and how important it is to take apart a fireplace, because all of that was done really well. And when things started to happen, it was almost like Dahlia, our main character, was gaslighting everyone into being like, it's not really that big of a deal. So the house is a little haunted. It's fine. Everybody needs to just stop freaking out. We have to get this job done. I did not appreciate that at all. Like, I know your dad's like in the slammer with money and shit because you guys overextended yourselves, but don't sit here and tell everybody that what they're experiencing is not that big of a deal. I had some trouble with that, but like I said, the high points of the book, she did write very well. Unfortunately, the high points all happened at the same time, pretty late in the book, and I was a little bit over it at that point. The ending, I really liked. Those last couple pages really did it for me. I really liked the ending. So, like I said, I struggled with my rating because at the end of the day, I did think it was a decent book, but it was not up to par with the Nick Cutter book, but it was not as bad as the Cassandra Khaw book. So yeah, it is what it is, I guess. The last book I read in October was The Dead in the Dark by Courtney Gould. By this time in October, I was struggling to do anything, and we were running out of time in October, and I was like, I need to make a decision whether I'm gonna read this book or not. Well, at this point, I had considered October not a good reading month because the Japanese book and then the haunted house book really did not do for me what I was hoping for. The only good book I'd read this month was the Nick Cutter book, and it had taken me a lot of energy to get through that book. And so I just didn't know if I wanted to commit to another book. Well, let me tell you, I'm really glad that I decided to pick up this book. It was really well worth the read. This is a YA book. It is also an LGBTQ book. I thought the representation in this book was just really great. We're also getting some POC BIPOC characters, and just the feel of this book was done really well. So we have a main character, Logan. Her dads do like a paranormal TV series together. Logan is at the point where she's just ready to move out, move on with her life. She's tired of moving around the country for the TV show. Feels very disconnected from her fathers, especially one father specifically. And she just kind of has this air about her that she's done. As soon as she's 18, she's out of here. She's gone. Well, 18's actually pretty close for her, like maybe 4 or 5 months. And her one father, Alejo, comes to her and says, hey, we're moving to this really tiny town in the middle of nowhere to do location shooting for the TV show. And her other father has been there for an extended period of time. So she's already like, why are we already going if he's been there? What is taking so long? Right off the bat, she's got like a lot of questions that no one wants to answer. So they go to this little tiny town called Snakebite. When I tell you this town is backwards, I mean that with my full chest, okay? You cannot read books with homophobia in it, with slurs in it, with racism in it. Highly encourage you to not read this book. I really felt for this book because this town that they wrote about really reminds me of where I grew up in all of the worst ways. I grew up in a very backwards town. So it wasn't this bad because this town is extremely small. My hometown was quite a bit bigger than this, but a lot of the things that were said, a lot of the tension that you could feel between people in the book, it all felt very real to me. It all felt very accurate. And it was difficult to read. So if those are things that you cannot read about, I just suggest moving on. But there are many towns still like this out there. So yes, and I think that Gould did a really good job writing it. So they go to Snakebite, and basically just all of Logan's father's past start coming forward. And part of the reason that they're there is to investigate a couple of teens going missing. Well, of course, since they're outsiders, the town does not take to them. There's a lot of animosity, there's a lot of hatred, and everyone wants to know why they're there and why, when they came there, young kids started going missing. I can't really get into much more because I feel like I'll give away like key points of the plot. The representation here was really great. The story was very twisted. There was a lot of layers of things happening here, and I remember just getting so frustrated throughout the book because no one was willing to tell Logan anything. It was like they were still seeing her as a kid that couldn't comprehend what was happening, when in reality Logan is one of those kids that was forced to grow up really early because her dads were really not around, or they were busy working a lot. And so she could have totally handled everything, and they just didn't trust her enough to let her handle anything. And that was like, it was painful for Logan. And I was so frustrated with Logan's fathers for not giving her a little bit of credit. Like, I was really disappointed with them for not trusting her a little bit. So yeah, there were lots of moments of frustration when it's like, stop treating these teens like children and start trusting your kids a little bit, because the whole town had secrets and everyone was keeping secrets from their kids, and their secrets ended up being the downfall of everybody. So yeah, and I feel like this is just kind of the case with YA books. Parents just don't trust their kids. Like, I don't know, it was a really weird balance between the characters. But at the end of the day, this book had a very twisted, very dark undercurrent to it that really worked. And by the time we got to the end of the book, I was like, okay, it really worked. It really worked. And there were lots of really high moments and lots of just devastating moments when you were like, this is it. This is the end. It's all over. So I think Courtney Gould did a really great job. The reason that I didn't end up giving it the 5 stars, just pacing issues. Again, I feel like there were too many moments when Logan really should have just put the pressure on her dads to give her answers, and she didn't. And there were just really too many moments where I just didn't feel it was super realistic. I gave it 4 very good stars. Very happy giving it the 4 stars. Like I said, great representation in this book. The vibe that Gould was able to get between these, like, I would call it small town politics, she nailed it. She nailed all of that. I think she did an excellent job. And the story was actually really great. Also, there was a little shout out to Tulsa, Oklahoma, which I'm not from Tulsa, but it was actually pretty close to where I live. So I was like, oh my gosh, people know us. This book checked a lot of boxes for me. So that's all I have for you guys today. If there were books that I would recommend from this lineup for the month, it would be The Deep by Nick Cutter and The Dead in the Dark by Courtney Gould. Those 2 books were definitely the best takeaways from October. The other 2, take it or leave it. Yeah, if you watched the Maybe series last week, I'm gonna have to take it a little bit easy in November just to give myself some space and alleviate any extra stress from my life. I think everybody can probably agree with me that the holiday season is the most stressful time of year. November and December are by far my least favorite months of the year. I absolutely hate the holiday season. I know people are gonna think I'm like a Grinch or something. I don't get into the holidays, the hustle and bustle, and all of the things that we have to do at the holiday. There's a lot of like pressure to perform in November and December, and my baddies with seasonal depression know this is not our time to be anything. Not our time to perform to anybody's standards, because it's just difficult to just do the day-to-day. And So I really struggle these couple months of the year. I'm trying not to put a lot of pressure on myself for November, and I'm trying to prioritize things. If you've made it this far, please hit all the buttons down below so you know when I'm posting. I post every week. I'll continue to post every week, even if it's just to say a quick hello and talk about some books that I'm interested in. I promise I'm not going to abandon the channel. This is one of the priorities for me, is making sure I stay up on YouTube. So yeah, check back in with me next week for new content, and I will see you guys next time. Bye!